Welcome to the Upreneur podcast for the University of Entrepreneurs. I am your host, Jeremy Straub. Welcome to our next episode of Upreneur. I am here with Randi Boyette, CEO of Spark Medical Marketing. It's been around for about 7 years. Randi, thanks for joining us on Upreneur today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So Randi, you've had Spark Medical around for a while. Before we get into your story as an entrepreneur and kind of how you built your business, can you just tell us briefly what Spark is and what type of business it's in?
Sure. So we are a full-service digital marketing company, but dedicated only to the medical and aesthetics industry. So it's a unique business model because it's very niche. So we do marketing for mostly physicians, med spas, and anything that falls under the health and wellness sector.
So what made you decide to, get so niche in the sense of the digital marketing space? Obviously, there's a lot of agencies that open up in that space and a heavy amount of competition. Was there something that drove you to just building it around a niche?
So my background, I spent 13 years at Christian Dior in the aesthetic space. And when I started in digital marketing, I was across the space, and I noticed that I happened to just do better with, in the aesthetic space. And as I grew more clients and my customer base was skewing more 50, 75% in that way, I decided to just go all niche, and it worked out well because then we really developed an expertise in those markets.
So, there's an article written around 1,000 truth fans, and the concept is you should build a business just focusing in on getting 1,000 truth fans. And a lot of people that focus in on a niche tend to be able to do that quicker than if you're looking at a broader market, or at least be able to scale faster. Have you noticed that you've been able to differentiate yourself from a lot of the other bigger digital marketing companies that might have more resources, bigger space just because you're in the niche? Or do you feel like, it doesn't completely differentiate you?
Yeah, we've definitely been able to differentiate ourselves because of this specialty, rather than running different campaigns all week, one for chewing gum, one for running shoes, one for an insurance company. We've really been able to dial in and become experts in this market, and people are now seeking us out after all of these years. So I'm thrilled with it, and over 3,000 customers. So we're really happy with what we've done.
Very cool. Congrats on the success. So Randi, how'd you end up as an entrepreneur? It sounds like you were working for a larger company with Christian Dior, and I forget who owns Christian Dior too, but obviously it's a bigger company. And then you decided to go off on your own. There's a lot of listeners and people that are thinking about that, but never walk away from that W-2 employee model because they're scared to start their own business. Did you always have an entrepreneurial bug? Was this something you just kind of was itching in you and this is your first experience in it? Can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Sure. So I would say it wasn't really planned. When I left Christian Dior, I wanted to just do some consulting work. And it was somewhat entrepreneurial, just thinking that I could get enough clients to keep myself busy. I wanted to be in one location after 13 years of Dior and traveling the country, and decided that I wanted to kind of dial in one spot and started consulting. And very quickly, the company grew, and I didn't even know I had the entrepreneurial bug until I started, running the company and loving it. And I found that closing a deal that was my deal, even if it was only, say, a $20,000 deal versus a $5 million deal I would close at Dior, I had even a bigger rush because it was something I did for myself. So right then I realized there was something in me that I had not even noticed before.
Oh, that's awesome. And so when you made that shift to the consulting side, your idea was never to actually run your own business and start, hiring employees and scaling out. When did you start to see going, this could actually be like a full-time gig and I could actually build a real business to it? Was there an inflection point, do you remember?
Yeah, I think about 4 years ago, I was like, wow, this is really a thing, like, you, when you jump into it without intent and it grows slowly in the beginning, you're not even realizing what's happening. And then I remember when it was only 4 employees and 5 employees, now we have over 100 on the payroll. I just remember being, about, maybe we were at 40 employees and we were really getting heavy duty clients on board. I remember saying, wow, this is the next level, and saying, I'm just going to take this as far as it can go.
So what was the hardest part as you really started to, I mean, it's one thing consulting, you probably felt comfortable with it in the sense that it was probably 70, 80% of what you did beforehand. But as people start building a business, when it comes to hiring, developing infrastructure, even to just taxes, running the books, all the pieces that go along with running a bigger enterprise, how'd you start to learn all that? Where did you start going for resources to figure it out? And let's just start with that. How did you start figuring it out? You think of that book, The E-Myth, right? The E-Myth is somebody's good at a skill, and then all of a sudden they realize that they're running a business and it wasn't the skill that they expected to be good at. You were good at digital marketing, but next thing you know, you have all these other pieces to run the business. How did you start learning that part?
So it was a lot of trial by fire. I mean, I had to learn it, based on what was coming at me. I had to figure things out, but I will say I had some help. I had some great mentors and friends that were entrepreneurs that helped me very much. But my father is an entrepreneur, and I was able to lean on him for a lot of advice and for a lot of, referring me to a lot of experts for different things as they would come up, like whether it was having the business insured or financial advice and who to hire to do all these things. So I think one of the most important qualities for becoming an entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur, is resourcefulness. And I've never been handed anything, whether it was before I became an entrepreneur or now, where somebody asked me, could I do something? And the answer was no. I've always figured it out, and I've had enough confidence in myself to know I could figure it out. Even if I couldn't do it, I would find someone who could.
So talk a little bit about how you actually went and did that. Was that a matter of just asking for people for advice on it? Was it a matter of just Googling? Did you just download a lot of podcasts or books? Was it all the above? When you say you're resourceful, talk a little bit about what somebody may take about on how to actually become resourceful, like figure out how to scale.
So I was very lucky. I would say that one of the things that really drove my career always in general was the connections I've made throughout my whole life. I mean, still friends with people from grade school, on up. And I just always made sure to stay in touch with people. And as social media took off, I was able to put up different posts. This was before Instagram was ever a thing, but on Facebook, I would say, I remember when I was asked by the first time, can you help me build a website? Now we were doing their digital marketing, and they said, can you build a website for me? I didn't know how to build a website, and we didn't have a web developer on board. So I put up a post on Facebook and said, any of my contacts, do you have anybody that is great at web development? And then I'd get all these private messages, and social media still remains a great source of the best people that we've gotten on our team at Spark.
That's great. And so any advice you would give to somebody that was starting in the marketing industry or digital marketing industry, and maybe thought the same thing, where if they have a niche that they know a lot about and they feel that they can be able to do it, any advice you would give on the experience you've had?
So I would say go slow. I mean, when I started, we zeroed in on one thing that we were great at, and then we expanded slowly. I think, sometimes people try to jump in and be all things to everyone, and then they don't wind up being great at any one thing. So slowly we branched out to different, verticals, and making sure that we could handle them in the digital marketing space. On the other hand, making sure that you are accommodating your customers. So go slowly, set the expectations, correctly with the customers, and letting people know, when you're starting, it's okay to, ask, for their advice, their help, their feedback, because people are quite human during those times, especially if you're not charging them through the nose. They're happy to work with you and give you advice back.
So, as you talk about kind of just sticking with one thing until you're good at it, I think it's a struggle for everybody, right? Because you start to see the shiny new object, you start to see maybe another opportunity you think can be lucrative, and it's hard to make the decision not to jump there. I always tell people you should probably pick like 2 or 3 things you want to get an A on, and then get a C on everything else, and just be average at it, and be really focusing on what you think are the most impactful parts of your business, and get really, really good at that. Can you just talk a little bit about how you dealt with it as you saw other opportunities, you saw things that you felt could be a place to go expand to? How'd you restrain yourself to get really good at one area? Because I think that's a difficult skill set, but one you see of most successful entrepreneurs.
Yes. So, throughout, especially, this last couple of years, there have been people that have, approached us, customers, large customers. Can you do this? Can you do that? And the answer is always, yes, we can. And then I have to make a decision of if it is really what we want to focus the business on, or do I just want to refer them to someone else to do it? And those opportunities continue to come at me. And I think all of us as entrepreneurs have some type of gut instinct. I try not to, as I get older and wiser, make any decisions very quickly, and really think things through from not only a business standpoint, like, is this going to be fun and can I be good at it, but like, what's the margin look like on it? What kind of people can I bring in for it? So now I've learned to look at things as a whole, instead of, wow, I can do this and this looks like something that we can make some money on, but the long-term play, not necessarily just the short-term play. So weeding through those items is not easy, but sometimes I've had to say, we're not working on this right now, but here's somebody who can help you. And that is something I do try to make sure I do. If a customer asks us for something that we're not going to focus on for them, I do always try to connect them with somebody who can help them. People remember that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, the decision where you know that there's an opportunity to make money, but you don't want to say no to the client, but you're trying to decide on, is it worth you building the infrastructure? Is it worth you building time, with the idea that you'll have a bigger margin versus less of a margin if you refer it out and just get a cut? And I think that decision-making process is always difficult for business owners. You're trying to keep as much money as you can, and you're trying to be able to cash flow as well as you can on it. And I think it's a tough decision to be able to do, and one that makes a difference, because it's not even the dollars you invest into that other business vertical, it's the amount of time and effort it takes to be able to build it out, where it might be worth partnering through it. How do you decide on some of those partners or outsourcing it when it's a reflection of you? Because a lot of times early on in business, you might be using an outsourced process. You might be bringing in some contractors to do some work for you before you put somebody on your payroll. Is there an approach you take in deciding on what partners you might work with, what contractors you might bring on as you're deciding to add on another product line or another aspect of the business?
Yes. So when I completely refer the business out, like outside of Spark, say somebody asks me for a call center, that's not, a service that we provide. So I will refer them to that person, but one of the things I make sure, and I have our team state as well, is they are not affiliated with Spark. We're just making the referral. And quite honestly, and because I heard what you said, I've never asked for a cut from a partner or somebody that I refer to, because I don't want to be stuck with someone that I'm not sure and I can't vouch for. And when I'm tied to them financially by just referrals, it can wind up getting to be a sticky situation. So, we say we're not affiliated with such and such, but we have had many customers that have been happy with this service or this company. So that's, the answer to the first part of that. The second part, when we do dip into some other arenas and start with, bringing on some contractors or specialists in that area. I mean, I really dive in deep with them. One of the things now that the company is so large, I can't just have one person who's good at something. So even if I meet somebody who's great at, say, developing a specific type of software that we need, I have to hire a second person to kind of run next to that person so that we make sure, say that person winds up, having to leave the country. We don't know what's coming up. I need somebody that can back them up. So there's so much responsibility with that when you bring on a contractor or somebody that's not really tied to your company, but nevertheless, it happens as we dip into new areas. My suggestion, because we do it here, is always have a backup person for that person, because as we've realized over the last year or so of business, nothing is predictable anymore, right? So we want to make sure you always have a backup.
No, great point on both cases. So, I look at one of my companies, a financial services company. When we refer out to an attorney or accountant, we always give 2 or 3 attorneys or accountants. Don't ask for a cut at all, but it's, here, it's your choice. Here's 3 really good people. You make a decision on what you think is best, and kind of keep an arm's length, but still be a resource. So if there's a book, Jeffrey Gitmer has written a bunch of books on sales, wrote a book on networking. He talked about one of the biggest aspects of networking or building connections is your ability to be able to refer. Becoming someone, this is an old school term, but somebody's Rolodex, and they know that they can come to you for any part of what is kind of in your wheelhouse for your business. And I think it's a good example of it. But the interesting part, and I think most people don't take note to it, especially early on, because it's difficult from a cost perspective, is you don't want a single point of failure with any role in your company, where it's so tied to one person, and if something happens to them, whether it's a positive thing and they get promoted to somewhere good, or for some reason something doesn't work out, that there's a point of failure in your business that's going to have a detrimental impact. And having those redundancies is an extremely important piece to the successful transition of the business. So
absolutely,
you've been running the business for a few years right now. You've been in the space for a while, and we talked about some advice you would give. Is there any bad advice you heard, whether it was early on in your career as starting out from a business perspective, or even bad advice that you hear in the digital marketing space that's worth sharing?
I really don't hear a lot of bad advice. I don't know if I've become just a very positive person. I don't really, I guess, thrive on conversations where the negativity is coming. There are people who, come in and listen to what I'm doing, or, over the years, and have been like, oh, you can't do that, or, this won't happen, or that won't happen, just that kind of thing, but not really bad business advice over the years. I've definitely become an independent thinker and learning to think from my gut versus listening to what anybody else has to say. I feel that bad advice is really just somebody telling you that you can't do something, but you can. So when somebody tells me I can't do something, it just makes me want to do it 10 times better.
So what have been some of the bigger challenges that you've run into in scaling your business out to over 100 people that's working with your firm, and being able to have over 3,000 clients? It's a decent sized business you're running here. Is there some challenges that you didn't expect that you had to face, and how'd you overcome them?
Yeah, so definitely, the things that you were mentioning earlier, like running the financials, the legal, the HR, all the things that go on behind the scenes, like making sure your company's insured. Like, I didn't know that when I started that, having business insurance, and then there's digital marketing insurance, and then there's employee liability insurance, all of these things that my brain dislikes thinking about very much. I am not that person. I am the front of the company salesperson. I like to represent the company. All of those things just take up space and time for me. And I realized that was a challenge for me. That was a hurdle. So when I brought on a business partner to handle all of that, that is when the company blew up, because I was trying to do it. I'm a bit of a control freak, as probably most entrepreneurs are. I was trying to do it, and not only was I not good at it, but it was slowing me down from doing all the things that I was really capable of doing. So within a year of my business partner coming on board and him taking on all of that, then the company just quadrupled, in size, and it just keeps continuing to do that. But those challenges were realizing what I am good at, what I should be focusing my time on, and I'm still learning that, right? Because the company continues to grow, so I realize every day, as I realign what I'm doing, what can I pull myself out of? What can I hire, somebody to put, a new person into that role that can cover for me? That's been the biggest challenge, is learning to separate myself and who I can hire for those roles.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult move for any entrepreneur as you scale your business to start to let the reins go, where you know that you kind of build all the systems and processes and they might do it a little bit differently, and then not want to just jump right in. Can you just expand a little? Two parts I want to expand on. Let's just start out with the partner that you talked about. The idea of bringing in a partner is always a hard decision, and congrats on the success from it, because a lot of people have a lot of success because 1 + 1 = 10. But you also have a lot of people that have had misfires with partners where it didn't work, and they talk about being in the business or a significant setback. Can you share a little bit about what made you decide to bring in a partner? Maybe just expand a little bit more of what you were talking about and how you think it's been so successful relative to some of the horror stories you might hear.
So how I decided that was, just meeting someone who happened to have, in conversations, a lot of the skills that I didn't, and just kind of diving into that. So, realizing that it was like a yin and yang thing. One of the things that I think, and just from watching other entrepreneurs and friends and business associates, I'm 50 years old. I've seen a lot. I think that where people fail is when they bring on a partner and they try to do everything together, right? So like they're running the entire company together versus splitting it up. Like my partner and I have very succinct responsibilities in the company. And not that we don't bounce ideas off of each other for what's going on in our own areas, but at the end of the day, I have the final say on my side of the company, and he has the final say on his side of the company. And that's definitely helped us. I see some other business partners where they're just trying to run next to each other all day and do everything together, whether it's 2 people or 3 people. And I think that winds up clashing because one person has to have the final decision.
How'd you go about getting that lane clarity? Which I mean, obviously you had a sense going, okay, hey, you're really good at financials. I'm good at vision and bringing in business and that. There's some obvious pieces of where you kind of fell. But was there any work done that each of you did, or together, or even with the coach, on how to get that lane clarity to make sure that you're kind of sticking there with your decision making? And you started this is your baby, not wanting to jump in and be like, but wait, I don't want to spend here. Don't tell me I can't spend here. Or, might have been on his part where he's saying you can't go market here when it's going to drive enough revenue, but he might be more thoughtful about the expense. Talk a little bit about how you got into that good rhythm around lane clarity.
Yeah, so, sometimes it's through a little bit of arguing and headbutting on things. And then both of us realizing sometimes that, maybe I thought I was better at something than I really am, and vice versa. And I think there needs to be a sense of humility and like self-actualization, right? So know thyself, as they say, and being able to say, maybe I'm not the best at this. So, for example, my partner oversees HR and everything having to do with human resources, along with all the other things I mentioned. So with that, there became where he or his team would have to talk to the employees or speak to them about important things. And through him doing that, we realized that wasn't a good idea, because I'm the one who's built the connections with the employees. And then when they would hear from him, they would get almost scared, and like, he doesn't really have the, the I don't want to say the people, but the finesse to deliver messages sometimes. And so we had to work through that. So sometimes it's just realizing, hey, this is not, even though you're in charge of this part, maybe I handle this piece of it because I've built a relationship with the employees. So let me deliver the messaging. So over time, and it takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to say, okay, I'm not doing a good job at this, and I'll take a step back. And sometimes you butt heads, but I think that one of the things that has helped us is that we are so busy and growing so fast that we don't have time to argue. And when something comes up that we do butt heads on, we have to come to a conclusion and solve it, because we have to move on. There's so much work to be done. If we were sitting idly and had time to bicker over it again and again, maybe things would be different. But because we've been running so fast for the last 4 years, we don't really have time to sit around and argue over things and get in the weeds with that, because we have to make a decision and move forward. And I think that has been a good thing for us.
Yeah, no, that healthy conflict is something that I don't think a lot of partners have been able to figure out. And I think you mentioned something that's interesting, right? So people want to be on the forefront, but sometimes it doesn't leverage their skill sets. So that was a good example where, he might be coming up with the idea, but the delivery of the idea, he might not get that feeling of it's my idea in front of people. And he would have to be a little bit of, take a little humility approach to it, a humble approach to it, to allow you to be the forefront of delivering the messages on it, knowing it's going to have a bigger impact for the business. And as long as you guys are both at a spot that it's going to improve the business and you see it and the business keeps growing, it makes it a lot easier to be able to make those decisions. So that's good feedback and good advice for people on the phone. There's a book called Rocket Fuel. It has to deal with two types of leaders, and they talk about Steve Jobs and Wozniak, or Bill Gates and Paul Allen, and the idea that there's this visionary that has direction and people follow, and then there's the integrator that kind of makes all the gears of the machine go. And having both those leaders leads to a company that can scale quickly and succeed. And it sounds like both of you guys kind of fit those two roles. You mentioned earlier too, you talked about the ability to kind of hand the reins over to people as you're growing and developing. Can you, I got just a couple more questions for you, but one was around that. Can you just talk a little bit about how you go about that? Because I think a lot of smaller companies never grow to their potential because they can't be able to delegate responsibility out, and they get very frustrated in that process. And because they want to keep their hands so far involved in things, it stops the growth engine that really could make that business hum. So talk a little bit about how you went and approached that, and how you either got it through on a mindset perspective or built, a repeatable system to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, so it's very difficult, to find someone that you hit it off with and trust to fill those gaps. Trust is a very big deal. One of the things we do at Spark that's somewhat unique, although I know other companies do it, which is where I got the idea. Everybody that comes on board at Spark is on like a 90-day probationary period, right? So we make sure we love them and they love us, and then it's a good fit all around for everyone. So I've become really comfortable with that, because it's kind of everybody proving themselves to each other. Like, say somebody comes on that I'm really excited about, you're like, I'm going to want to make sure I spend time with them, because I know this is just, I've told them it's only 90 days, so maybe they still have one eye open, looking for something else. And on the same token, they're making sure that they get in front of me to show me their skills, because they can't just settle in just right away. So that 90-day probationary period has really helped us. On top of that, just when I am considering somebody that is at an upper level to take over a large responsibility, I put them through some tests. I talk to them, I ask them their advice on things, I give them a scenario and see how they react to it. That trust is is huge. And like we said before, making sure that there's somebody always that can kind of pick up where they left off if there's an emergency. Again, we all learned that lesson the hard way over the last year or so. There were times where we were caught and I was like, whoa, what are we going to do right now? And we had to assemble. So during that period, I learned the hard way that everybody always has to have almost like a buddy system, right? So, but I am very slow to trust, but it's definitely something that I have to prove. I couldn't just hire someone tomorrow that I just met to take over a department of the company. I would have to bring them in as a mid-level role and build some rapport and trust with them before I could grow that. There's been some situations where we've had to, bring someone in quickly and have them, but on that, when I'm doing that, I am probably a little bit more of a helicopter manager than I'd like to be, because there's fear of trusting. So I don't know that ever goes away, but you learn to manage it by, coming up with, tests and conversations and things that you need to do to make you feel comfortable, whether it's, that they're available after hours, or, asking them, can they speak with you about something, or asking them to handle something for you, and then finding out how the other person reacted to it. So, I would say it's kind of slow and steady when it comes to trusting new people to take on the bigger roles.
I'd love to deconstruct a couple pieces to that for one. So let's talk about that 90-day dating or probationary period. So, we've heard some of the tech companies go about doing the same thing, or bigger companies doing it. And I'm just curious on a practicality perspective, how do you position that with the person when they're first starting? Are you bringing them in as 1099 or W-2? Are you telling them when they first started going, listen, there's some type of agreement that's written down that says, here's what I expect from you in 90 days. And if you have this is your formal offer. Can you just talk a little bit about how logistically that works? What does it look like in that conversation?
Sure. So they are a contractor for the first 90 days. And we just let them know that this is a probationary period. We want to make sure it's a good fit for both parties. And that, obviously if it's cohesive, what we do is we take the salary we offer them, we break it down into a 40-hour week and pay them accordingly. So they get their full salary, but it's paid out a little bit differently than if they were a W-2. And then after the 90 days, if we decide to offer them the full-time position, then they become eligible for benefits, and then they become a W-2. Now, in some cases, we're not ready to make a decision at the 90-day mark, and we say we need a little bit more time. But we do position it to them and saying, this is a very rapidly growing business, and we have a very unique culture at Spark, and we need to make sure that everybody is a good fit. So, if it winds up being a good fit, then great. After 90 days, we're both all in. So I usually offer everybody on the team the position, and I get that point across. And so far, nobody has really had an issue with it over the last 2 years.
How much of it's performance-based in those 90 days versus behavioral, just fitting in the culture? And some of the soft, you can't tell, work ethic, their ability to work with other people, that type of thing.
It's everything. I mean, we get to see a lot over the course of 90 days. I will tell you that, fitting in culture-wise and making sure people are accountable and loyal and, just able to work on a team, that means more to me than the proof of their skill set. I feel like we can always work on their skill set a little more with them. Obviously, if they drop the ball and really screw up, that's different. But if we feel like we can develop them in their skill set, I feel better about that than if somebody says to me, well, this person really has trouble working with the team or has a bad attitude. That's it after 90 days. If you have a bad attitude now, I can't fix that, but I can fix the skill set.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And then what has been some of the positive aspects you've seen of that approach? And what would be some of the areas where you're like, well, this is where it gets a little bit difficult, maybe the negative side to it?
So the positive side is obviously that we're not committed, right? We're not in a committed relationship. So if it winds up not being a fit, I don't feel as bad because in the digital space, many people that we interview and that come on board they already have like some side work, some freelance work that they're doing. We let them know you can do that, during your first 90 days. Once we offer you a full-time job at Spark, that's it. You're committed to Spark. So you're in an exclusive relationship. So I don't feel, so tied to them that if we did have to let them go, we wind up telling them it's not a good fit. They still have their other work that they were doing. So I don't feel so bad about it. So that's what I love about the 90 days. I've had to call up people and say, you're a great person, happy to give you a reference. It's just not a good fit for Spark. And that has happened. On the negative side, I think that people get a little nervous, and I'm not sure if, they're able to relax or whatnot around that. But there's not a whole lot of negativity around it. I mean, for us, it has really worked out well. And I'm going to continue with it.
No, I love it. I love it that it gives both parties a chance to shine and make sure they both deliver on what they said about it. I always talk about in the interview process, that's the best you're ever going to see anybody. Nobody's better than they were in the interview process. Very rarely, if I can even think about it, I was like shocked that somebody was so good that I didn't think was going to be good in the interview process. So I think that idea of that 90-day period to decide on both sides if it's a good fit, I love it. I love it. A couple more questions for you. Talk about, and let's just go a little bit personally on your career path. What was the most memorable day in your career that you can think of? Now that could be, as an entrepreneur, it could be with Christian Dior, it could be, somewhere else. And it could be either one, interesting story, or two, maybe it was an impactful time period that you can think of.
So I think that the most memorable, most impactful thing that's happened for me was deciding to go niche with the company. I was so nervous to do it, and I kind of went back and forth for 6 months over it, thinking, well, what if I cut off this, all these insurance companies or lawyers or people that we were doing marketing for, and lose all of them, and then the med spa industry fizzles out or something. There was all these what ifs that came around that, and it was a really defining moment for me when we made that decision, but also the best decision I've ever made, because now we are the largest aesthetics marketing company in North America, and it has driven people to really seek us out, and the industry knows Spark and trusts Spark, and they look to Spark in the aesthetics industry, and it was the best decision I've ever made, and I love being associated with just one industry. It's really what defines us. So I would say that would be the most impactful decision moment in time, that once I decided to do that is when the company really took off.
Well, and it's a very hard decision to have. For my business is all financial advisors. And there's a saying in that industry, and might be other industries too, that there's riches in the niches. And the idea of building a niche will end up, exploding your financial planning practice. Yet it's such a hard decision because you're walking away from other business, and it's a brave decision for you to be able to make as a business owner, and it's one that I think everybody can, logically say this makes sense, but when it comes to emotionally doing it, it's very, very hard to be able to do. Can you talk about what you think is a favorite failure for you? And I'll couch it as this: I understand that I never saw a failure. I see everything as a positive. I learned from, and all the stuff you'd say, when it comes to that. But maybe a favorite setback, or something that happened to you that you're like, oh, this is awful. And then either one, you learned from it, or it was also another defining moment for you, or it's just funny. I don't care which story it is.
Sure. So I think part of my own failure, but which I was able to turn around, is realizing the things that I was not good at. And probably one of those was like bookkeeping, right? So when you're growing your company, you're keeping your own books. That's really a hard, thing to trust someone with, right? Your money, your access to all of that. And I made some huge blunders, back in the day when I was keeping the books and running customers' credit cards. And there was one day where, I ran all the same credit cards twice that I had run the day before because I was so exhausted. And I'm a person who doesn't really sleep. I sleep probably 4 hours a night, and I just had forgotten because I took that batch and I ran it all again, and I was like, oh my gosh, I did this yesterday. But it was just a defining funny moment, and one of my favorite failures where I was like, I need to do something else here. Like, I shouldn't be running credit cards at 3:00 in the morning. This is when I realized I have to find somebody else and I have to expand. And those moments when you kind of kick yourself in the butt is when you realize, okay, I have to do something different.
No, great example. Great example. Well, there were lots of pieces from our conversation today that I think can give people good advice on whether it's walking away from a career to consulting starting to build up, because I think it's an easy transition for people to move to consulting as their first step into entrepreneurship into something else. But I love just the idea of how you're working with employees. I love the 90-day. I loved on a number of different pieces that you went through. I think we could probably share probably 4 or 5 specific nuggets that people could take away from this. So, Randi, I appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us. If people want to find more about Spark, let's say it's somebody that is running a medical practice or has some medical products, what's the best way to find you or the company?
SparkMedicalMarketing.com.
Okay, great. And we'll put it in the show notes too. Randi, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I had a great time.
Thank you for watching the Upreneur podcast, and don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and share this with anybody who you think needs to hear it.